Hello everyone, this is Mohammed Anan. I'm the Cloud Engineering Manager at Royal Cyber, and today we are conducting this webinar for Log4j, Vulnerability Analysis and Remediation. Uh, a little about Royal Cyber. So Royal Cyber is a Chicago-based company. We have 1,400 plus employees across 9 countries, and we basically deal in software development services related to e-commerce, whether it's cloud native solutions, migration, modernization of applications, cloud analytics, mobile development of applications, and so on and so forth. And we are currently serving 700 plus customers across the globe. A little about agenda. So we'll try to understand what Log4j is, right? How it works, what is remote code execution, right? And how what is the impact that it has created? How can we test and fix it? And a quick demo, which will make things a little bit more clear to all our audience which are watching this. So the very first thing is, what is Log4j? Again, um, the Apache Log4j is a Java-based logging utility, right? And it is something which is heavily used by all the Java developers as a default mechanism of logging their applications, right? And its main reason is because they need to understand what sort of and they need to troubleshoot if there are any sort of errors once their application goes into live. So it's very popular, right? And it's being used for more than 20 years now. So something which the Java developers are very familiar with. And then it's part of the Apache logging services, right? Now what is the problem, right? Since the last week or 4 to 5 days, in fact 8 December, when this issue was first identified, so there has been a lot of talk about it. Multiple security cyber expert companies, they're giving webinars and they're discussing these issues, and the reason is because the vulnerability is very severe, right? Right now Log4j is being used by millions of applications across the globe, right? Millions of applications across the web, right? And it's vulnerable versions which are from 2.01 to 2.141, right? Now why these versions are vulnerable, we'll talk about that, right? As we proceed. But the impact which has been identified is classified as CVSS level 10, right? And the reason why we've done this at level 10 is because number one, it does not require any sort of network authentication, right? So it can be this can be impacted over the internet. It doesn't require any sort of user authentication as well, so it can directly, the impact can be created directly, right, by any user on the web without any sort of authentication. And then obviously it can execute code which can probably do anything to damage your systems, to compromise your applications, to harm your database users, which is why there's not a number, there's not a score which is greater than this. So it's been regarded as CVSS level 10, right? And it's the most critical vulnerability you can have right now in your Java applications. So, and to make things worse, active exploitations are already in place as we speak. So Mirai botnet, it is also now using this vulnerability to impact applications. Different worms, different exploits are being actively developed, so so that the users and various applications could be impacted. So and it is going, its effect is going to, and the magnitude of this effect is going to be very, very vast, which is why we immediately need to understand and then address it, right? So how did this happen, right? So Log4j from 2.0 version onwards added lookups, right? And it also included the JNDI lookup, right? And JNDI lookup is basically used for LDAP servers and for DNS lookups, right? That's what it's used for. But somehow it was not fully restricted, was not entirely restricted, right? And the vulnerability was that it was still able to refer a Java class through URL, which makes it vulnerable to malicious code which can be executed remotely. So now this was the main problem which Log4j still had, right? Which was because of the JNDI lookups. And how this entire JNDI attack works is simple. So the very first step is that the attacker inserts the JNDI lookup in a header file, which is likely to be logged, by the vulnerable server, right? So that's what it does. That's the very first step. Then secondly, the string is passed to log4j for logging, because that's what log4j is supposed to do. As a result of that, log4j interpolates the string and queries the malicious LDAP server, right? And then the LDAP server responds with directory information that contains the malicious Java code, right? So this is what happens once this specific action is performed. And then finally the Java itself downloads the malicious Java class and executes it within the system. And then the entire system gets compromised, and whatever the code which was downloaded from that vulnerable LDAP server is executed on that specific server. And that's how this entire vulnerability kicks in, right? And so the impact is very severe, right? Again, when we talk about fixes and mitigations, so the very first thing is, obviously, if you are running a log4j version 1.0 to 1. Let's say 9, so then the risk is very low, especially if you're not using JNDI configurations, JNDI lookup in your configurations. So then you're fine. But if your application is using log4j from version 2.10 all the way till 2.14, then that is vulnerable. So you have to upgrade to the latest release, which is 2.15, and now they've also released 2.16. So in 2.15, they were able to fix a JNDI lookup. They were able to close that down, and in 2.16 it's completely removed. Again, it's not possible for all application environments to immediately upgrade to these latest versions, right? And if that is the case with your application, then you still need to remove the JNDI lookup class from the class path, right? And then that's what we've shown over here. So if you do this, the Java developers, right, if you execute this, it will hopefully remove the JNDI lookup class, and that should mitigate you. Again, this is not a permanent fix, right? You have to eventually upgrade to the latest version. So you have to plan things accordingly, because this vulnerability is out there. Now a quick demo which I have for you. So this is one Java application which is running right now, and as you can see, it's running on localhost port 8080. So what I'm going to do is that it has log4j right now currently, right? And what logging application does is that if for example let's say I say buy milk, right? And this log4j is going to uh, uh, you know uh, log buy log or buy milk, whatever it is, right, on the main screen, because that's what an application does, right? And if I type hello world, it's simply going to log hello world as an output, right? So that's what log4j is supposed to do, right? But let's suppose and this is where the vulnerability lies. If I execute this string which is uh, the main vulnerability, right? So I will be able to find out the runtime version of my Java, right? And if I send this, if I post this in the header of user agent, right? And if I execute this, it is going to give me the version, right? So it's not logging the entire string which I give. It is actually executing this specific command at a system layer, and it's giving me the version, right? And the criteria, the chances are very significant. I can even get my OS name, what's my OS name, for example, right? So all this, I'm able to do this remotely, right, through a URL, right? So I'm able to refer through to these Java classes remotely, and I'm getting these I'm executing these scripts on my system. Now, uh, if it's a malicious code, then the impact could be significant, right? So I can get all these specific informations which I have, and I can execute it. And this is the main vulnerability of Log4j. Again, how you identify that, it can be done through various tools, through softwares. Right now I have a Log4j scan tool. So basically what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go towards my application, right, and I'm going to run this specific scanner. So what it will do, it will go and it will scan all the directories of my log4j application, and it's going to find the vulnerable file. So it has found one vulnerable file, and it has also shown me that okay, it has log4j vulnerability, which is to a 2.141 version, right? And then I also in the interest of time, I executed this, I fixed it, right? And then I have another Java build where this issue is actually fixed. So if I run my scanner on that specific directory, I can see that it's going to run, and it's going to say that okay, one issue was mitigated and that there are no longer any vulnerabilities, right? So this scanner basically scans the entire Java application, and if there is any specific vulnerability, it can be identified. Again, this is some because I had the OS level access, but if you guys are using, or if any of you are using web applications and want to directly test it, there are several tools. Qualys is again very helpful tool. So what it does is that it has multiple features like vulnerability management, cloud agent, so on and so forth. So its web application scanning tool is very helpful, and all you have to do is you have to create a web application scanner. You give your HTTP endpoint, and what it does, it performs a log4 shell scan. And right now I performed this for this specific endpoint, and you can see that if I go into its scanner, right, it will give me a very detailed report which will have this specific detection. So I can see that okay, log4j remote code execution vulnerability existed in this specific report, right, which the scan which I made earlier. And then obviously I was able to fix that in the other build. And when I scanned for that specific application, we can see that that specific vulnerability was gone. And in that we will not be able to find that specific vulnerability, the extreme vulnerability for log4j. Again, there are other vulnerabilities that still exist, but explicitly that's high level vulnerability of log4j was mitigated. So just to summarize, so you can identify these vulnerabilities using these scanners, using these third-party tools. This will give you a clear-cut visibility of where you stand, right? And then you can adopt various ways of fixing this specific issue, and save your applications from a potential cyber security attack and potential vulnerability. So that is all from my side, and we're open to questions. All right, so we have one question, which is, it says, can you talk a little bit more about what is the problem with JNDI lookup, and will disabling JNDI lookup fix the issue? All right, so I mean, to answer this again, if we talk about lookups, they were introduced back in the 2.10 version onwards, right? And the lookups are very important when we are building Java application, when we are logging Java application, right? They provide a way to add value to log4j configurations at an arbitrary places, right? And there are various lookups like context map lookup, there's data lookup, there's environment lookup, which helps us retrieve environment variables from the configurations, so on and so forth. And then there's JNDI lookup as well, right? And if you talk about JNDI is nothing but a Java naming and directory interface, and this is something which is an API, and it has been a part of Java since a very long time, right? And this is something which the developers use to access naming and directory level information when they're building their application. So JNDI API is very important, right? JNDI lookup is something through which you can retrieve naming and directory values, and it's used for LDAP servers, it's used for DNS lookups, so on and so forth, as I mentioned in the presentation. So now what's the main problem, right? So the main problem is, because of this JNDI lookup thing, now you can remotely execute code, right? So you can refer to a Java class through HTTP header and URL paths, right? And through this, the remote code execution is performed. So just to answer the question, GNDI, that's like the main problem with the GNDI lookups, right? Now if you talk about just closing down, or just removing GNDI configurations, that is a mitigation. Again, the first priority is that we try to upgrade to the latest and stable versions, because JNDI lookup is just one vulnerability, right? There might be more vulnerabilities as well that's not discovered as yet. So the best thing is we migrate, we upgrade to the latest version, which is 2.16 or 2.15, whatever is feasible. But again, if that is not possible, then yes, closing down JNDI lookup configurations right inside our Log4j will be able to mitigate the issues, but then you have to plan your upgrades accordingly, right? So that's one thing to answer that question. And now we are looking for more questions. Okay, so the one question which has come is, do you have list of tools which can help to conduct hunting on Log4j? Yeah, so I think there are a long list of third-party tools. One Log4j scanner which I used was a part of the which can be used at an OS level. But besides that, there are multiple applications. I talked about Qualays, right? So that is something which is very helpful, right? You can use Qualays, you can use Tenable.io. So that is a very helpful tool which will be able to, which you guys can use, which to scan your web applications to identify these vulnerabilities. Then AWS, Azure, GCP, if your applications are hosted on these cloud native applications, so they've already introduced native solutions. So most recently, AWS announced that they have integrated Log4j identification and scanning as a part of AWS Inspector. So if your application is running in an EC2 instance, then AWS Inspector will be able to do the job. GCP has also introduced and indicated this in their security inspector, security auditor, which is security scanner, sorry. And these visibilities and visualizations can be seen in the security command center, and same is the case with security center as well. Then few again all the community editions and free versions and free trials, so you guys can use that and quickly identify and quickly refer and at least scan your applications and get a clear cut visibility. Okay, so I've got another question, which is, if I'm just using Log4j to just print the logs into a log file, but no processing is done, is it still vulnerable? Again, it all comes down to the Log4j version, right? So if the version is from 2.1 to 2.19, right? If that is the version, then your use case for Log4j is obviously to log applications, right? Whatever the application logs are being generated. The main vulnerability which we need to understand over here is that since JNDI lookup is enabled, right? For these specific versions, and if your application is specifically using JNDI lookup, then the vulnerability exists over there, right? It is there, and right now as we speak, as I've mentioned in the talk as well, there are botnets which are continuously exploiting this specific capability. So on a safe side, if even if I mean, the logging applications are used for printing, right? But this specific vulnerability can be exploited, right? So you do your internal evaluations, you do your internal considerations, and but if you are using this specific version, right, and if there is a feasibility to upgrade to these versions, then that is the best thing which is recommended. If that's not possible, and if you have closed down Log4j, JNDI Lookup configuration itself, and then you're only using Log4j for printing basis. So, our understanding is then that is completely fine, right? So yeah, I hope that answers the question. All right, so someone has asked that, we have identified Log4j vulnerabilities in some of our applications and reported to the vendor. However, the vendor is suggesting that the application are not vulnerable to Log4j vulnerability. How can we be sure that vulnerability is not there? So again, ask for some sort of measures that they have taken, right? So if you have identified Log4j vulnerability in your applications, and it is because the impact is very severe, and it's not necessarily something which is related to your application, but even if it's something which is related to third party applications, right? And if they are using Log4j for logging their environment, and if they have enabled JNDI lookups, and if their version is from 1.1 to 1.49, 1.14, 2.14, sorry. So then they have to provide some sort of documentation or some sort of report as well. You can, for the safe side, just ask them for a Qualys report or a Tenable report that they have done for their application, right? So that is relatively very simple, right? They only take a URL endpoint, and they're able to identify the entire vulnerabilities which exist there inside the application. So I think that can be a safe bet, right? You have to be absolutely sure, right? So vendors might be hesitant at this point in time to admit that their application or the third party tool that you're using from them could be a part of vulnerability. But again, we have to take all safe measures. So until unless there's a scanning report which you guys can audit, can possess, it's not recommended. You go ahead and you ask for them what sort of measures or what sort of scans that you've done, and again, you've identified that, to probably you've also some sort of scanning as well. So you provide your proof, you provide your reports, right, and then ask them to provide what measures they've taken. And if the issue continues to persist, then the best advice is to look for another tool or another third party that tool that could serve the same purpose. So that's what we suggest at this point in time. So yeah. Right. So someone has asked that what is the fix for Docker apps? Again, any sort of Java applications which is running this specific Log4j versions and have JNDI lookups available. So the fixes we've already talked about fixes. The first thing is you upgrade to the latest versions. If that is not possible, close these configurations, JNDI lookup configurations for the time being, and then when the time is right, then you eventually upgrade to the latest versions. So yeah. Okay. Someone has also asked, how is it different from SQL injection attacks? Yeah, that is a very interesting question. So again, the SQL injections, they were something which took the internet community by storm when they were first when they first came into play, right? And SQL injection is a way through user tricks the database, right, and is able to execute queries which is harmful for the database layer. Now, it might be a little bit similar, right, to SQL injections, but the thing which is different is in SQL injections, right, we whatever the user input we receive, and we sanitize it, we transform it, right, and there are a lot of SQL injection frameworks and mechanisms which the developers they have best practices for the application development, which prevents SQL injection, right? Now the thing about this specific vulnerability that we are right now observing in Log4j is different, because number one, when it comes to logging, right, logging as a mechanism is something where you have to log the user input as it is, right, for better troubleshooting, for better understanding, to reason why the application crashed, if it crashed because of any sort of user input. So you, unfortunately, you cannot transform the user input, right? So I think this is something which even the internet community and the development community will think about as they focus and try to build logging applications, or develop logging applications and frameworks, is that it is something which is relatively new, because and that's how I believe it is comparatively different from this SQL injections. So yeah.
Hello, everyone. So, Hanan, I would like to add something here. Um, I just saw
Sure.
a question that how can you secure the software that uses Log4j? So, the um the criticality of this is that even if it's not your LDAP on the back end, it could be an LDAP on the outside, right? You need to first of all close the lookups on your application. So ensure that lookups to anywhere, inbound, outbound, they are blocked. They are not allowed from firewalls or from inside or outside. That is one major thing that I can think of from network infrastructure perspective. Because even if you, let's say, blocked internal lookups, and if someone is using a vulnerable LDAP, right, and he queries through that LDAP to your uh, web internet facing applications, and you are running the vulnerable Log4j versions, then it is possible that the code that the application could execute it. So you need to make sure that uh, lookups are closed, and both inside and outside of the firewall port 389 TCP, they are closed, or either 1389. And then the main thing is that that specific class that Hunan mentioned, right? That has to be disabled. Uh, uh, that has to be disabled completely, right? If you need to ensure that uh, your if you need to ensure that your application is secure, so that is the first major thing you need to do, right? Over to you, Hunan.
Yeah, no, I think that is that is answered wonderfully, and I guess we had one more question, a similar question, which was someone asked that I don't have an LDAP server on my local network, or my the network where the application is running. So am I safe? So again, to answer this, if the main issue is not having LDAP server in the network, right? So the LDAP server, the malicious LDAP server, can be outside of your network as well, and that's the main point of this entire vulnerability, right? So someone can refer to that malicious LDAP server and execute something which execute a malicious code in your environment, in your system, through this vulnerability, right? So it's very important for us to understand that it's not just something which is going to harm your LDAP servers which is running in your environment. In fact, a malicious LDAP server can be used as malicious code execution source, right, for this entire vulnerability. So that is something which is very important to understand at this stage.
And There is another a point I would like to add. So there is another testing tool, log4j-tester.trendmicro.com. So that is another good tool that guys can use to identify uh, your applications. So at this point, what we recommend is that the first step you should take is that you identify all your internet public facing applications that you are using in your infrastructure, and then you start one by one by scanning all of them, regardless either it's on Java, PHP, .NET. So day before yesterday, I was doing a search on my PC, and I just did log4j search, and I found out that SQL developer client has log4j as well. So that was a really surprise for me. So you never know what application is using log4j. So yeah, so that is one more point. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And someone has also asked, can you quickly show us how you can, create a scan using one of the third-party tools that you used for demo? So can I have the screen sharing ability? Okay. All right. Can you see my screen? Okay. Okay. So again, if we talk about Qualys, right, and again, it's relatively similar in Tenable, it's relatively similar in other third-party tools as well. So if we talk about Qualys, right, it has multiple, infrastructure security tools, right? So one is vulnerability management, one is the web application scanning, and the other one is Cloud Agent. Specifically, if you want to quickly, do a scan for your application, right, you can simply go over here, right, and you can give a URL, whatever it may be. So 10, for example, this is one of the URLs that I've used for the demo, right? So uh, going inside, to the web application, right? And then it says add a web application, right? So first you add your specific web application, right? You can select a blank one, right? Name it, for example, log4 shell test scan, right? And then all you have to do is you have to give your third party or application endpoint, right? So this is my application endpoint for this specific demo. Continue, and then whatever the scope is, you can also go on and further define that, right? Then most important thing is the scan setting, right? So here you can select for log4 shell options, and this will explicitly focus on log4 shell scanning, right? And then other configurations is something, if you want to add some sort of Selenium scripts, so on and so forth, any sort of redundant links or any authentication mechanism that you have for your party or application, you can provide that, or you can just leave that blank if it's just a an HTTP endpoint, right? And you run the scan, right? You can run a vulnerability scan because that's what it's going to go for, and it's going to search. And then finally, it once again asks you to include the application which you've just included, right? So you say continue, and then log4 shell profile is already selected. You say continue, review, and confirm, and that's it. So that is how easy it is to immediately go today after this webinar and run a scan on Qualys. And I think similar process is there for other third-party tools as well if you want to do a web application scanning, right? So it's the scan is going is goes into a submission state, right? And after that, you are able to see the scan results. It takes normally 15 minutes to 30 minutes, something like that. And once that happens, right, so right now you can see that this specific scan is in submitted state. So it will go and it will see if there's any vulnerability, and if there is any vulnerability, it will give you a very detailed report, right? So for example, this is what I showed in the demo. So right, it's a very detailed report which you will get. And if there is any specific vulnerability, like log4j2 or log4 shell, it will give you that in the results, right? And then based on that, you can take appropriate actions, whether it's upgrading the entire log4j or version, or going about doing some sort of mitigations. So yeah, so you can take the screen access back, Amir.
Yep. Uh, so do we have any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much everyone for joining this call today. And I hope we are able to answer your questions. And if you have any further questions, you can email us at info@royalcyber.com, and we'll be glad to answer that. Yep. And thank you once again for joining us today. Yep. Honan, you want to add anything here?
No, I think you've done that brilliantly, and so we'll be happy to answer your questions. We'll be looking forward to your comments, but about what you've think about this entire webinar. Any sort of feedback that you'd like to give, and obviously as Royal Cyber professionals, we are here to assist you, help you in this journey, and any sort of assistance that's required from our end. We'd be happy to help, and looking forward to the answers, survey question answers that you've done. So yeah, thank you very much from my end.